good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from. It's good to be back again in the community and to be able to speak to you all. Today has been back-to-back trainings for me, so I'm a little bit stressed, but trust me, I'm talking about something that I like to talk about, Microsoft Defender for endpoints. So I'm ready for your questions. I would like it to be interactive, so I really would, in between, be asking if there are questions. And so if you do not want to speak, feel free to drop in the chat room, and then the moderator can help ask these questions as we progress. I'll be sharing my screen now. Just to let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I remember, I think a month ago, we had a session where we said Microsoft Defender, not just an antivirus, and we took our time to explain why Microsoft Defender is not an antivirus and it's a full-blown endpoint security solution. And so based on that, we decided to have another session where we would take you through an administrator series and show you how Microsoft Defender works and how it integrates and some of the capabilities and features of Microsoft Defender for endpoint. My name still remains Joy Ibeabuchi-Emedom. A sneak peek into my life. I have over 9 years experience in information technology across different industries and sectors. I'm certified in Microsoft, certified ISO lead implementer, COVID, IT certified. My background is around infrastructure. I've done infrastructure application integration, end user support, service measurement, IT security, governance, compliance, cybersecurity, and I've played in that space. I've worked across different sectors: financial, oil and gas, manufacturing, and a couple of SMEs. I'm married and blessed children. I'm a fitness enthusiastic person. In 2000, I went for the first weight loss reality show in Nigeria, and I was able to lose 21 kg in 90 days. Unfortunately, I moved to Europe and I just went back because of the cold. But it was a fun experience to see that the body has the power to heal itself, and I got that from that 90 days experience. It's aired all over CNN, and it was aired all over CNN. It's available on YouTube. Okay, I have some very fun words that I use in the course of my life. I believe that you do not have to give birth to a child to be a mother, and so we're all responsible for raising children. And when we all have that mindset that we're all responsible for raising children, I feel that the world will be a better place, because it's not about if I raise my child right. If we all raise our children right together, then we'll have a better place, community. And so like what we do in SheSecures, where we're all raising IT giants together, it's not about you. We function better when we come together as a team to do that. And I'm also fond of saying that technology did not come to take our jobs, rather it opened the door for opportunities and creative ways of doing things. I do not accept the school of thought that sees technology as a displacement tool. I say to people, if a role that you're occupying today, technology was brought to replace your role, what you should ask yourself is that how do you become the one that feeds the technology with that information? We all know that technology is garbage in, garbage out. So it means that you're needed, that experience you have can be translated into technology. And so you've just been challenged to go and see how to use technology to upskill yourself to do that job better. I do not believe that jobs are not available, but I believe that people should think of creative ways and opportunities to take advantage of the opportunity that technology is bringing. On that note, we would, I think this is a 5 or 6 week series. I'm not sure, I can't remember again, but we'll just be going through Microsoft Defender for endpoints. So today, we'll try as much as possible to see if we can cover all of this. If we can't, we'll move it on to the next class. But what I planned for today is to look at Microsoft Defender services. What is Defender for Endpoint, the key features, capabilities. Then we dive into the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint portal. So I'll be interchanging the word MDE when I do not want to use the full word Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And so when I use the acronym MDE, I'm still referring to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. We'll look at the portal, an overview of the portal, and then we'll look at device inventory, excuse me, and the checklist, the architecture, and onboarding process. We'll see if we can cover all of this today. And like I said, in between, I'll be stopping to ask for questions so that because it's supposed to be seen as this is now the training, in between the asking, so that if there are questions that you have, we can take it and not wait all to the end. Okay. So Microsoft over the years, in the last session we had where we talked about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint not just being an antivirus, Microsoft over the years had played around the security space and had tried to play around antivirus, anti-malware. And in recent time, Microsoft has expanded its security suite and has come up with a threat protection suite that it calls the Microsoft 365 Defender services. You will hear people call it the Microsoft Defender family. You will hear people call it the M365 Defender suite. But Microsoft has created the Microsoft 365 Defender services, and the 5 core, services that you will see is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, the Microsoft Defender for Office 365, the Microsoft Defender for Identity, and the Microsoft Defender for Clouds. With the high rise of cyber attacks and threats, one of the core responsibilities for any organization is to ensure that they are secure. I like to say that there are 5 key elements that every organization will want to protect: your email, your identity. Who can give me another one? I think your secrets, and I think email, identity, secrets. I think am I blank? Email, identity, secrets, devices, and apps. I'll take it again. Email, identity, devices, apps, and secrets, and I'll explain. So this, I like to categorize them as the 5, entities that every organization would like to protect, because when an attack wants to happen, there has to be a point of entrance, there has to be a point of entry, and there has to be a point of spread. And so these 5 entities, as I like to call them, are ways that attack vectors used to penetrate into your organization. So for today, we'll be looking at the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And when you look at endpoint, anything can be your endpoint with focus to devices here. And it could either be your servers, your workstations, your mobile devices. Okay, these are all forms of endpoints. Now, Microsoft, why we look at organizations that are concerned over the security postures, and over time, because of the way that the attacks are regularly attempted, and try to hit unprotected or misconfigured devices, which pose as risk to any organizations, right? Attackers will take advantage of this and try to do damage either to your device or your data. We can see this over the years. Organizations are suffering from reputational damage, financial loss as a result of this. So it's now very imperative that an organization has to protect their devices. Now, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is Microsoft's own cloud endpoint security solution, and it offers threat and vulnerability management, attack surface reduction, next generation protection, endpoint detection and response, auto investigation and remediation, Microsoft Threat Expert. And so this centralized configuration and administration APIs protect both your clients, your servers, your mobile and network devices. So you would see that this is just not an antivirus. This is a total endpoint security solution that sits in the cloud. I'll drop a link in the chat when we're done of a Microsoft overview video that you can watch in your spare time that will also help you put all of this together. The good thing is that this also protects whether it is Windows, whether it is the Windows desktop OS, whether it is the Windows Server OS, whether it is your Mac OS, yes, your Mac OS, your Linux OS, your Android and iOS devices.
Recording in progress.
Oh, were we not recording before?
Oh no, it was recording. I think someone had just joined. So
okay. Also, okay. Now, you all will agree with me that the pandemic made organizations to begin to understand that threat management and protection is no more in the internal defense layer. Ideally, prior to now, what you would have is that you will go to your office to work. So the IT security would have ensured firewalls are the right segmentation, antivirus updating from the data center, and your EDR and XYZ. Today, what has happened in the pandemic is that organizations have seen that now people don't have to function from a particular location. So there's now that demand on organizations for IT to give people the ability to work from anywhere and on any device. Now, the demand on IT security now has also increased, because while you're giving that privilege to users, you also want to still ensure that the organization is protected. And those are the foundation by which Microsoft has used to improve on the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, whereby you can be able to meet up all these requirements from the business and the users while still ensuring that security is at its best. So what are the key components of the Microsoft there are three key components, one of which is the organization's data will never be shared with another tenant, and it is only accessible to your organization, right? Each tenant will come in with its own built-in dictionary that will help define behavioral rules, anomaly and detection algorithms in your organization to detect suspicious events when it's gathering sensor data. And your tenant can also enable you create sandbox environments where you probably want to do malware analysis that are peculiar to you. So also, another key component is the sensor. The Microsoft Defender for Endpoint uses sensors. These sensors are on the devices, and they use it to gather security-related information on each of these devices. Now, the sensors will send this information over to the organization, over to your tenant, and then the sensors are what helps you to now do the detection, to do the investigation of the events, to collect the information for analysis. The sensors will also help you to trigger actions where you want to do automation and response. It would also help you to gather the files and isolate a device from the network in the event of an attack. The good thing is that for Microsoft devices, for Windows, from Windows 10 and 11, from Windows 10 and above, that's Windows 10 and 11, these sensors are already embedded into the device. So as an organization administrator, you have gone away from that worry and pressure on ensuring compliance. I'm sure if I asked us to raise our hands for how many people as administrators were tired of every time they told them to pull out compliance of agents, whether it is the EDR agents, whether it is the TVM agent, whether it is the antivirus agent across the organizations, they were never able to meet 100% compliance. I'm sure that if I asked us to raise our hands, I will get over 90% of administrators here say yes, they've never been able to meet compliance, 100% compliance on devices in organizations, because either there's network issue in pulling, either there's a constraint on the size. But the good thing is that by default now on every Windows 10, your sensor already exists. So you don't have to worry about pushing out sensors to Windows 10 and Windows 11 devices. The same applies to Windows Server 2019. But what Microsoft has done is that for 2012 and 2016, it has made these agents available. And even for 2008 R207 before they became end of support. Also, another important key component here is the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. Now, the portal is the central management system that you will log in and you will be able to see your tenant. In this place, you'll be able to see devices that are part of your tenant. You'll be able to see the capabilities. At this same portal, you can now manage, protect your endpoints. You can do those TVM, threat vulnerability management. You can do the EDR policies. You can do automated investigations, remediations, and all whatnot. For organizations that are integrating with Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which used to be called Intune, is Microsoft's device management portal. For organizations that have integrated with Intune, okay, they have also the ability to be able to configure policies for Microsoft Defender, such as EDR policies, antivirus, attack surface policies on the endpoint.microsoft.com portal, which is the Intune or MEM portal. But these are the three key components as an administrator that you need to know and that you'll be working with. So your tenant is dedicated to you, your sensors are already on Windows devices, and then your Defender portal is where you will go to log in. We will look in subsequent classes how you would do your role-based access control if you want to configure, and how you do other things from this Defender portal. Now, this is what the Defender portal looks like. If you type security.microsoft.com now, it will redirect you to login, okay? And when you log in, depending on what email address that you use to log in, it automatically will redirect you to the tenant of that domain. And then if you are given rights as either a security administrator or setting role-based to see the security.microsoft features, depending on what you see, you can. So for organizations that have delegation of duties, we'll be looking subsequently how you can use RBAC to differentiate what people will do. If somebody else is responsible for threat management, if somebody else is responsible for antivirus, somebody else is responsible for compliance and reporting, you can distribute those roles across by using the RBAC permission tab. So at a glance, this is the different toolbars that you see in the MD portal. So you have your home. Your home will be a dashboard that will just give you a glance of what's happening in your environment. You know, you see your secure score. Note that the higher secure score means that once the secure score is high, it means that lower identified risk. Meanwhile, low secure score means high identified risk. This is for this dashboard. So this secure score means that we have high risk in this environment. Okay, we can tell you the number of devices that are in this tenant. You can do a bit of threat analytics. You can see users, and when you scroll down, you see other information at this dashboard view. When we go into the demo or the hands-on, rather, you will be going through each of these modules: the home, the incident alert, hunting, threat analytics, and then we'll go down into endpoints where we are focusing today. Another key interesting Another key interesting view at the Microsoft Defender portal is the device inventory. Remember, Microsoft Defender for endpoints, okay? And your device inventory is where you see all your endpoints that you are managing at the Defender for Endpoint portal. Whether they are mobiles, whether they are network devices, whether they are IoT devices, you will see them on this dashboard, okay? And then, so the device inventory tab is a very important tab that enables you to see. And once you're on this tab, once we go in, you'll be able to see once we go into the hands-on, we're able to show you the different informations that you can get at the device inventory tab. So your checklist, the first thing you want to do as an administrator is confirm your licensing. This is salespeople's headache because licensing requirements varies. They are not, I tell people, for the time in my life I used to do license review and design. I used to tell people that licensing it's a function of system integration. So you need to understand how systems talk for you to be able to prescribe or recommend the type of licensing. So it's a full-blown course to understand Microsoft licensing so that you advise people right. But the first thing to do is to ensure that you have the right type of licensing. So depending on your type of organization, depending on the organization numbers, most times what we have seen, in recent times, that a lot of organizations already have these licenses, but they don't know, or they already have majority of the licenses and just need to buy one add-on and they don't know. So I used to tell people, if you're already using Microsoft Office, it will be good for you to begin to find out if you already have these licenses. And if you're working in large organizations that already continue E3 and E5, you seem to be in a good place already. So license requirements, checklist, and then the next thing is your network requirements. So depending on how your organization is structured, right? You would see when we go into method and approach why network requirements is on the checklist. Somebody will say, but if this is a cloud service and the devices have access to the internet, what other network requirements do we need? Oh, yes. Remember, these are corporate devices. So there are certain things it could be that your organization still has, and that takes us into the planning, design decision, deployment approach, onboarding phases. So if your organization still probably has SCCM, what used to be SCCM is now called Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. So if your organization uses SCCM, it means that you probably want to still manage some workloads on your SCCM, or if you want to move all your workloads to the cloud. So that decision needs to happen. That design decision needs to happen. And depending on what we agree there, we will need to now look at the network requirement around that. Okay. Or if you have Intune, what we now call the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, the integration of Intune and MDE would also define or determine your network requirements. And then we have group policy and local scripting. So these four different components play a key role in your design, decision planning, and deployment approach and onboarding phase. So these are things you need to checklist for before you commence the rollout of Defender for Endpoint. Any questions so far, please?
Yes, Joy, there's one. They said someone asked Helen, is there a free sign up or you pay for it like Office 365 for work? And they're referring to the MDE portal.
Okay. Currently, Microsoft gives trial, 90 days trial. So that's the good thing, whether you're an individual or whether you're an organization. As long as you have Office 365, you can get 90 days trial. And I think within 90 days, that's enough for you to explore and determine if this solution actually meets your requirements. So I think that answered the question.
Yeah, there's no other one for now. I'll keep looking.
Okay. All right. Now, the architecture, like I mentioned, in the design and decision, you want to pay attention to your organization or your environment. Now, the typical cloud native way is you have a device, whether it's Windows 10, whether it's Android, iOS, Mac, and then you just want to communicate straight to Defender for Endpoint. And these devices are managed with Intune. Remember, Microsoft's own device management solution is Intune. And so once you use Intune to manage these devices, they can go straight to the internet. That means they do not talk to any form of on-prem or private cloud infrastructure. These devices will go straight to Microsoft Cloud via the internet. The EDR will talk to the Defender for Endpoint, and the Intune will talk to the Intune for onboarding and configuration and remediation policies. That's one design approach. Another one is what you call the co-management. In the co-management, you have your Intune and then you have your configuration manager. In your configuration manager, you have your configuration manager, which is your SCCM. You can choose to want to use your SCCM to push out the onboarding agents, okay, and still have some workloads on the configuration manager that is used to manage these devices on-prem. Okay, so in a situation where you have an SCCM environment and you want to spread the workloads, so you want to say device management, antivirus, attack surface reduction, firewall being managed by Microsoft Defender, and then probably you worry about your regular Windows update or something with SCCM. You can have co-management, okay, using Defender for Endpoint. You can run a co-management architecture using Defender for Endpoint. Also, we have another approach, which is strictly on-prem. And this is where you just want to use for onboarding. You want to use the configuration manager to push the onboarding script, or you want to use group policy to push the onboarding script. So we have the regular Active Directory group policy. You can choose to use that to onboard, and then also use the group policy to onboard. Like I said, this is all peculiar to your environment and what your IT strategy or IT approach is. It's just that Microsoft has made these options available. You know, for this class, we'll be looking at cloud native, whereas an Intune managed device, we're talking to Defender for Endpoint. And that's what we'll be looking at. But in large environments that have SCCM, that have Active Directory, during the design and architecture stage, these are some of the questions that you will need to ask and take these design decisions, which is why we called it out on the checklist as something you need to do before you even start the onboarding and rollout. How does it work? You know, simple. Your Microsoft Defender for Endpoint service, right? You have to onboard a device into this service. You have to onboard the device into the service, number one. And once you onboard this device, the device reports back to the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint service as an onboarded device. Okay, and then that device is authenticated using your email address, which authenticates to the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is your identity. So once you've been able to establish a trust with the Azure Active Directory, it puts that device in a device group. That device now gets into a device group. Now, based on the device group, there are policies that have been targeted to that device group. And those policies are now what we either determine, okay, you get the ETL, you get this type of antivirus policy, you get this type of attack surface policies. That's how the MD service works. Okay. In the absence of any question, we'll go straight deep dive into the Defender for Endpoint portal. Okay. Can we please see my screen?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay. So this is the Defender for Endpoint portal, and I can mention, sorry. When you come to your landing page, your home page, you just see a dashboard of key points or key analysis of the environment. In this tenant, I have just one device that is flagging at risk. I actually have only two devices, but one is down. So I have one device up, and that device is flagging at risk. So when you come here, you will have your home, which is here. You can see threat analytics. You can see users with threat. If you scroll down, you'll be able to see active devices. You'll be able to see devices that have been discovered, incidents, what time. This is a rough dashboard view, you know, of the environment. It even helps you do security feeds into, shows you Microsoft security feeds and updates around security conversations, total devices discovered, and so on at the dashboard. We move to incidents and alerts. once you go under incidents, yeah, under incidents, you'll be able to see a summary of, it represents a summary of incidents that have happened across your Defender suites. It will show here. So remember where we talked about that the Defender family has both threat management, Defender for cloud identity and endpoint. All those incidents, if you had those 5 capabilities turned on, as they trigger incidents, they will all come into this place. Okay, so the Defender, the 365 Defender portal is the central correlation interface for all the Defender services. And that's why if you look at the left-hand side there, you can see it broken down into endpoints, email, cloud apps, and identity devices, right? So as events occur across those whole Defender family, they will all land on your incidents page. That's why there's another part of the Microsoft career path that is called the security operators and analysts, because security operator and analyst is responsible for coming to manage this. But as an administrator, this is where you'll be able to see all the incidents that are occurring in your environment. As you can see here, I have a multi-stage incident that is involving initial access and discovery on one of the endpoints. I will come into looking into this. And then you can go into the alerts. Alerts will tell you, so an incident is a correlation of different events, right? And then these events now are based on triggered alerts. So based on the different alerts that happen, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can correlate it into an event. You can see that, oh, this thing that happened is matching to this one, is matching to this one. This is an incident. So you know how, look for a typical incident in an environment. Or they would say, the core banking application is not, so you walk into the banking hall. As a customer, they will tell you that the core banking, you'll say, oh, our network is down. That's what they tell you. And so once they tell you our network is down, you're not able to access the core banking. From an IT perspective, it could either be that the ISP provider of that branch is down. It doesn't necessarily mean that the core banking application is down. It could also mean that everything is up, but the core banking application itself is down. So let's assume an incident report was supposed to be done for, or on Tuesday, XYZ branch was not supposed to work. What you will hear is that you will see, oh, what's the incident? Core banking application was not accessible. And customers were not being served because core banking application was not accessible. And then you will see what are all the triggers. Oh, we couldn't do this, network was failing, blah, 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 and everything will match into what that incident is. So the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint correlates all the alerts and makes it into an incident. So you can see different types of alerts. It will tell you the detection sources, okay? Which of that component, remember where we said that the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is doing your threat and vulnerability, is doing your next generation firewall, is doing your automated investigation, is doing your endpoint detection response. For every alert, it will tell you which of the capabilities did the sensors use to be able to give you that detection. And so here, it was using the EDR. It will tell you when this activity happened, and it will give you the severity, the investigation state, is it new, is it closed, categorize it for you. And you can also come here to do some form of filtering. If you wanted to, for instance, filter and say, I want to see only high alerts, you could filter, and then there are no high alerts. You could come and say, I want to see only medium alerts. And then you could see only medium alerts. So you could have all of this at the alert view. As an administrator, you can filter if you wanted to include resolve, if you wanted to categorize it, and say I want to see malware, malware triggers, it will tell us. If you so whatever you need, how you want to streamline it, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint dashboard allows you to be able to have this much visibility. Any question, please?
Yes, there's one more question. Please, can you give more clarification on how devices are onboarded? So, for example, in Capacity, if you have the cloud, a link is sent to your device, and from there, the device becomes a part of the endpoint to be monitored. How does that work in terms of Microsoft Defender?
I like this, our student. Our student is very fast. Okay, we're getting into onboarding. I wanted to give you an overview of how the Defender portal is before we go into onboarding, so that you can understand each of the labels, what they're responsible for. So yes, we're going to look into that eventually. If we don't get into that today, we'll get into that next week. Okay, all right. And then you have your hunting. For those who are in advanced hunting, there you can use here at the Defender for Endpoint to do advanced hunting, okay, where you can run your queries and it will tell you about things that are happening, attack detections. This is your device inventory, where you get to see all your devices, whether they are computers and mobile, whether they are network devices, whether they are IoT devices, they will all appear here. The good thing about Defender is that it can also run a discovery. So for instance, if my device is onboarded and I am in the office today, by virtue of the sensor being on my system, it can discover all the devices in the network that have not been onboarded or that are onboarded and have whatever state, and then it can, using the device discovery, populate the device inventory, and it only just categorize them here as not onboarded. So that's when you will see here come up with numbers. So because of the sensors that exist, it can do device discovery across your network and help you pick shadow IDs. So help you pick devices, undiscovered and unrecognized, unprotected devices in your environment. It can help you pick. So those devices that you're not even aware of, they're not in the asset registry, for some reason you can't reach them by, when you try to push SCN agents to them, it will discover them and then you can see them here. They'll all show up as here as not onboarded, and then but you'll be able to know that these are all the devices that are on our network. And then once it does that, the sensor begins to communicate. So if there are Windows devices, the sensor will begin to communicate, but be telling you that they are not onboarded as long as a device on that network has been able to communicate with it. Okay. And then you have the endpoints where you have your vulnerability manager. Your vulnerability manager is what does your threat and vulnerability management. So today, what you would do in the vulnerability and management department is that you push agents to endpoints for you to be able to scan them to meet your vulnerability requirements. Or you will do an IP address scanning, meaning that if those devices are not up and running, you cannot know their state, as against using the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, where you can, because of the sensor, do a real-time, on-time Defender vulnerability management on each endpoint. Okay. Now, moving quickly, what next do? Depending, like I said, depending on whatever decision based on the design that you have taken, the next thing you want to do as an administrator is to set up your Defender for Endpoint portal. The first thing is to come to Settings, Endpoint, and land here. The first thing you want to do is, remember, this is a cloud service. So what it means is that your data is being stored on the cloud. The first thing you want to do is, based on your data storage and privacy requirements, and these are the 3 locations currently where Microsoft stores this data. So it'll be very important that you liaise with your data privacy team to determine where your data can stay, okay? I know that in Nigeria, most times we don't pay attention to these things. For most of the GDPR countries, this is a big deal for them. So these are the 3 regions currently, where Microsoft stores the data that it gets from Microsoft Defender for endpoint. And then, so when you're starting this for the first time, this will not be grayed out, right? You'll be able to select where you want to store your data, and then you save. Another thing you want to come here to do is is now the onboarding. So there are different onboarding methods. Like I said, depending on whatever method and design approach that we have taken. Okay, if you are a single user, like when I wanted to onboard a single user, all I did was come here, select the operating system that you want to onboard, and then select the deployment method. So it's either you use a group policy to push out the onboarding script, or you use the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, which is your SCCM, or you use your Intune, or you use a script for virtual desktop. Microsoft even considers the virtual desktop. If you're a full virtual desktop client in the environment, you running Windows operating system, you can onboard those VDI, non-persistent VDI. If you understand the concept of non-persistent VDIs, you know that they do not really have storage, but you want to be able to, when those devices are on the network, to be able to detect when they are having, when those devices are interacting with the network, because we all know that we have malwares that run on memory and run on memory, meaning that while they're running in the memory, which is a major thing that non-persistent VDIs have, they are prone to perforate the network. So Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has onboarding scripts for those kind of scenarios. And with persistent desktop, one of the unique things is that when they reboot, they actually become refreshed. But while they are still up, they are they become threat agents. So the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is able to protect them while they are up and running and secure both those memory threats that can happen to them. So there's a special onboarding script for them. So in this instance, I've selected here, and then all you just do is click on download the onboarding package, and an onboarding package will be downloaded for you that you can now use to move to your device and install. So for the person who asked how we onboard, I don't know if that answered your question.
Feel free to unmute your mic, Helen, if you want to issue answers, or you can respond as well.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so this, so you get a script. Microsoft advises do not modify for the very, very enthusiastic scripters. Do not tamper with this script. Just use it, load it. If you are using, so for me that's doing one device, there's no, there's supposed to be a supporting component if you're going to use SCCM or if you're going to use any deployment platforms, but there's none. I'm doing a one-man device. So once I double click it and run it, that's all. All it does is automatically onboards my system. I have already onboarded the system. So that's it. So this is how you onboard the system into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. There is nothing else to do. If you've pushed out antivirus, pushed out EDR, pushed out threat vulnerability management, you will see that this is one of the most easiest deployments that will ever happen in your life. I have been there. I don't know if there's any other person that feels the pain, but had to push out EDR agent, push out TVM agent, push out antivirus agent. What other agent? What other agent? Push out DLP agent for USB restriction. Push out what other agents? There are about 4 or 5 agents you have to push out to do endpoint security. And all you need to do here is to just run one script, which is a manual, or run a deployment script on a collection, either using group policy or SCCM. And that's all. The sensor begins to know where to push this telemetry. Okay, so on this note, we have onboarded, and that's it. Once you onboard, the device automatically comes to your device inventory and shows up here for you. And once the device comes, you will see it says sensor held active onboarded. And then it tells you how it's being managed. So I am using Intune, which is a Microsoft Endpoint Manager, to manage the device. Okay, and then if you're using SCCM, it will tell you Configuration Manager XYZ, but I'm using Intune to manage this device. And that's it. This device is onboarded. And so, because the sensor is on this device, I automatically can leverage all of this that we have talked about here. Everything here. Everything. You automatically can leverage all of this. Just by onboarding, running that script, you automatically are benefiting from TVM, from attack surface reduction, from next generation protection, from endpoint detection and response, from auto investigation, from Microsoft Threat Dispatch, just by onboarding it into the MD service. It automatically makes this device be able to do that. For you to benefit from those 6 functionalities, which we'll be showing you as we go through the class. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, there's one more question. Lillian says, who determines the alert type and also who writes the rules for the alert types?
Okay, so when you say alert types, let's go back here. You mean this category, right? Their default, their Microsoft's default categorization based on threat detections. Okay. I don't know if I did answer the question.
Yeah, feel free to unmute your mic if you want to ask, like.
Yeah, you answered
clarify.
the question. Now the second question is the rules. Who write the rules? Is it still Microsoft?
When you mean rules, policies?
Yeah, the policies, yeah, that determines the alert.
You are the one that configures the policies.
Okay.
Yeah. They have Microsoft, so Microsoft has the default policy, because once you're already onboarding, remember these sensors are already sending telemetries, and it's already seeing what is happening on those endpoints. So there are default baseline policies that exist both in Defender for Endpoint and in Intune. So it's already taking those actions. However, which is why it can classify you as your device to be saying high risk exposure, it has this. But at the same time, you're the one that would go and now create what your organizational policies are and baseline security requirements are. So remember where I said that depending on what you're using to manage, for my case, I'm using Intune. So I decided to do my configuration policy on the Intune. And so when you land the Intune here, it gives you also another dashboard about the device in your environment. And it can tell you how many devices are compliant. And when you come to devices, you can see whether it is Windows, iOS, Mac, Android, you can see all of them. And when you come to endpoint security, that's where you now create your policy. So when you go to antivirus, you're able to create an antivirus policy. But the first thing you want to do is create your endpoint detection and response. Once you create this here by saying create policy, what's the platform, depending Windows 10 and later, that's what I'm using. If you have Windows 11 or you. So now this is where experience comes in. Never create one policy for everything. And when I mean, for instance, I wouldn't recommend this in production. I wouldn't recommend having one policy for Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows servers. I wouldn't recommend that. Neither would I recommend using Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server configuration manager policy, right? For one. you either do your Windows 10 and then you can actually select this and then position it to server. So you will see where, when you're done creating a policy, you can assign it to an assignment group that has a collection of devices. So for instance, I want to do for Windows 10, and I'll come here and say endpoint detection, and then I create, and then I call it and I would advise you to always put, if a policy was created on a particular date, you can still put it here, it was created with a CR, then on your organization. If your organization is the type that before you do things like this, you go to change management, try to change management, you have a ticket, or you go to, or you create a service ticket for it. Form the habit as administrators to come in the description to put all this in. It helps, you know, even when you've left the position, it's just a nice way of doing things and a more neater way. And then block sample files. Block sample sharing for all files, not configure, expedite telemetry reporting frequency, yes, yes, and then you say next, and then I'm not using any tag, I don't, because I just have only one device, and then I can come here and create a group for myself and add. So in your organization, if you have IT, if you IT, executive devices, whatever way you have grouped your devices, you can come here and identify that group. I think I have a group here. I'll just use this group. And then that's it. If you want a group to be excluded, the same thing, put those devices in a group and then come here, look for those groups, and then you can exclude those groups depending on whatever they are, and then that's it. You're done. You've created your EDR policy, and that's it. The device would, based on the probe, I think I have a 60-minute configuration probe. It would probe and then pick up these new policies and start to action whatever you put there. This is just a simple way. What we have done now is we onboarded and we created the EDR policy, and you are done with EDR setup in your environment. It's this easy. I know people that have struggled in getting their environment to be compliant to EDR agents. This is it, we're done. The EDR sensor starts to pull out everything happening on that system and send it. This was just the policy I created. There's no big deal inside this policy I created, and that's all. And if you remember here, we're already getting detections and alerts telling you it was the EDR that was doing it. EDR. I didn't do anything different. That's all. One policy. One policy after onboarding. Your EDR is activated and it's working. So as an administrator, your life is, if you now have more time to spend to do more research, more intelligent findings than worrying about compliance. When CISO office, information security, write to you for your report, you are never compliant, you're getting bashing, it's like you're not working, you're fighting network people because of this. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint enables easy compliance. Okay, so now we go to the antivirus. Remember, we have onboarded. We just pushed only one. We didn't even push any agent. We just activated the sensors. The sensor was already on the devices by default. All we did was onboard it so that those sensors will know that this is the tenant where you're supposed to be pushing your telemetries to. That's all we did. And then we now come to define the policies. The policies are so that, like you have used the word rule, so that the sensor knows what actions to trigger, what events to collect, what response to give. And so when you come to antivirus, it's the same thing. You create, so that's what, when I told you that there was default policies by default, there are some default policies Microsoft will just put so that it starts to secure you, and then you can create your own policy. Okay. The same way you just write create, like I said, always have different policies for different operating systems. And here we're doing this term, and then assign it to, I think this is a Defender antivirus. This is your typical antivirus that you know. And then if you're very conversant with antivirus policies, this is just your typical antivirus policies. Allow archive scanning, allow behavioral, allow cloud protection. It's
Sorry,
very, yes.
actually, I think someone was raising up their hand. I
Okay,
think
please go
Helen,
on. Yeah.
you have a question.
Okay, thank you very much. So when you were talking about the device inventory, we had three categories: the computer, network devices, and
IoT.
I think IoT devices.
Yes.
So
Yes.
now for the first thing, I just want like a clarification. Is it possible your network devices fall under your computers? Like you have some systems
No,
that you've already onboarded.
your network devices, your routers and your switches.
Oh, okay. But what about the IoT devices?
Your IoT devices are your IoT device, your smartwatch, your smart PC, your smart fridge. They're all IoT devices.
Okay. So the last thing
As
I would
far
like
as,
to ask,
yeah.
what if you have talking about Office 365, you have people that make use of emails and they log in to Office 365, can they be monitored by Microsoft Defender?
Yes. So I'd like everyone to just allow me move a bit back. Maybe she came in a bit later. I'll just quickly show something and then we'll catch up. So if you remember here, the Defender family, right? So that what Microsoft has done has created a suite called the Microsoft 365 Defender Services. We're looking at Defender for endpoint. For email, this is what you'll be using, the Defender for Office 365. The Defender for 365 addresses the security on email. However, for the dashboard, it is still the same Defender portal. You would come here, and under here, you will see email and collaboration. And this is where you get everything about the email. So I don't have it in this lab, so I don't have any data, but this is where you see everything. And then it would pull up all the incidents and load it here. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome. Okay. So I was explaining the antivirus that if you're very conversant, if you manage antivirus within your organization, just so beware. If you're that person that says antivirus don't work, I like to put up a challenge when people tell me antiviruses don't work. I put up a challenge to them to say you do not know how to configure antivirus policies. So antivirus policy configuration is a skill, it's something you need to learn. It's not just a click, click, click. It's something that you need to understand because you need to understand how systems communicate, how processes communicate, how applications talk. So you need to understand how to configure antivirus policies. You also do not want to impact on user performance while certain things are happening. So I'll allow, I think I have I'll try and look for, I have like a baseline antivirus configuration that I can share that you can use as your checklist if you have to configure antivirus policies. I'm going to put a disclaimer there because I'm not in that environment where you want to use, but 100% of the time, those baselines work because it's been tested to provide at least optimal security when you use it that way. Allow archiving. In some instance, you might not want to scan and archive. Behavioral monitoring definitely. This is what turns on real-time protection, cloud protection, definitely, and email scanning, plus or minus. You might not necessarily want to do this, especially if you have the Defender for Office 365. You might want to allow the Defender for Office 365 worry about email scanning. So here is related. That's why I said that there are certain things that are baseline. In this kind of instance, we might say, put a caveat and say, if you have a Defender for Office, you might not want to bother about email scanning, because Defender for Office is already going to be scanning that. Allow full scan on Mac network drive. You also might not want to do this if you already have configured prevention of bilateral communication, if already your file server already has an antivirus running on it that is going to be scanning, so you don't want to impact, because by default, everybody's connected to that network. So you can imagine if you enable this, I'm scanning network drive, you're scanning network drive, we're scanning same network drive, we're going to have impact. So in this instance, we say not configured. Depending, like I said, depending on how the organization is. In some organizations, by default, everybody connects to a default network drive. I've worked in a banking system where you connect to your system in the morning, you're automatically connected to the general network drive that is hosting over 2 terabytes of data. Imagine having an antivirus policy that says full scan on Mac network drive. Imagine doing that. I'm scanning my network drive, you're scanning the network drive. The system is struggling, my system is struggling. So that's not a safe way to ensure prevention of attack from that network drive. No, there are other policies you can put in place to handle that. The network server itself can be scheduled to scan at off-peak period, and that way you don't have to have people scan connections to it. I hope I'm making sense. Scan removable drives, definitely. You want, once a USB is plugged to a system, it should scan. Once a USB is plugged, already by default, many organizations have policy that disable USB, but there are people with exceptions, right? And you won't agree with me that most of the time, the people that have USB exceptions are either senior people or IT people with high privilege. IT people who are administrators on their systems. So you can imagine an administrator taking a USB hidden check, and you don't have this enabled, and he plugs it and auto run runs. His credentials are already elevated. So this is a yes, you want to do this. Allow intrusion prevention systems. Yes, you want to allow intrusion prevention on systems. You want to do that. Allow scanning of all downloaded files and attachments. Yes or no, like I said, is relative. So you probably want to check in your environment, majority users, you want to say yes. In some environments where ideally we shouldn't be downloading things from the internet, you want to set this enabled. In some very peculiar business cases, you might want to create a unique policy for that business unit who probably are high volume. But anything downloading from the internet, you want to scan it. Allow real-time monitoring. This is a big yes. This is read write. You and I know that for every malware attack that happens on your Android is a function of a read write action, which you don't know about. So you take a device, you receive an email, excuse me, you open your personal email on your corporate device. Your personal email is not going through your email infrastructure, right? Good. Now you open that personal email. You probably chatted someone on LinkedIn, he offered you a nice job, you did the interview, and he said, I'm going to send you an email with a form. Please open it and fill it. So innocent you, the guy looks legit, the company looks legit. Fortunately for you, you don't know that they're all hackers trying to get into your organization, and they've done reconnaissance on you and targeted you. And so you open your personal email on your company laptop, and you open the Word document. And then as an administrator, it will tell you this is in protection mode. And because they said you need to fill and send back to them so that we can, we send you the offer, you need to accept that offer so that we can send it back to us. You're excited, you open it, the offer is legit, you want to allow it so that you can embed your signature. And then you say enable contact, macros begin to run. You don't see this, you will not see it. Okay, in one of our classes, I'll simulate that. You won't see it, the macros will run, and when it's done executing, it will do its triggers. Okay, so when all of that is happening, read-write actions are happening on the endpoint. You should not allow real-time monitoring to monitor read-write actions for suspicious activities. You will miss those kind of attack. Now you can see how the attack got into the environment. You were at home or you were out working from a workstation hub. You were not on the company's network, so you didn't have to go through the company firewall for the firewall to probably block. You use your personal email on your office laptop, and just because the guy is involved, responsible for configuring antivirus, did not configure real-time monitoring, that macros will run on your system and affect your system, and you wouldn't know, and it will begin recognizance on that system, begin to make bilateral communications, and then next week you come into the office, the backdoor sends a command control to sends the command and control response back to say, oh, we're in a new environment, this is a new IP, initiate it, and then they connect back. You're working on your system the way I'm working, but somebody's already on your system playing around. From there, they try to do whack to another system on the network, and you see another system, probably a printer that has been idle on your network that has a vulnerability, and they're able to land there, and they harvest more credentials. Guess what? They don't need you again. You've gotten to another endpoint. From there, they move around, and that's it. So it's very important that setting of these configurations, we pay attention to it. So this is an allowed. Allow scanning of network files, like I said, you might do this. Allow script scanning, oh yes. Allow user UI access. Some environments will say our users don't need to see our users don't need to see this view. Some people will tell you your users don't need to see the UI interface. Some people will say our users should see it. Some will say our users should not see it. So that depends on organization. This is just the UI interface. There's no big deal here. Okay. So let users access the UI. Some will say prevent users from accessing the UI. This has nothing to do with security. This is just about user experience. Some people don't want users to know whether malwares are being detected. It doesn't want them to detect especially executives. Most times you find executives, they're not interested. They believe that they're paying you guys to the job. So this is not a security requirement, it's just nice to have. Average CPU load factor, yes, you don't want to use more than XYZ percentage during the scan. So this is where you manage performance. So you can say, I always recommend to not go below 30 and to not go above 50. Check for signatures before running scan. Yes, you want to do it so that peradventure a system has not been able to scan for XYZ, has not been able to update for XYZ period. Before any scan initiates, you would like it to be sure that it's using the latest signature update. Okay, this is what we recommend so that it always checks. And then cloud block level. This is you saying that when there's a cloud detection, what's the block level? Do you want it to be high? Do you want it to, if you're doing this for the first time in an environment, I always recommend start low, understand your environment, and before you now enforce total lockdown. Okay. The zero tolerance is 0, so that even if they are false positive, you can manage them. Cloud extended timeout, yes. Space to retain clean malware. You want to use this, yes. You can put how many days you want to have the malware, just in case you want to take it for analysis. Disable catch-up full scan. So if you schedule a full scan and the system does not scan within that time, catch-up full scan is where you're saying that if you find out that we're supposed to scan every system by 10 o'clock every Friday, and Joy system didn't scan by 10 o'clock, when can you scan again? So for systems that miss full scan, or you say if you miss a scan, you've missed a scan to the next date of the scan. So this is where you do catch-up scan. And then no CPU resources, priority, yes. Enable network protection, definitely. In this instance, you want to say audit mode, like I said, in things like this, you do audit mode. You understand your environment before you lock down. This is in cases where you're rolling out for the first time. If you have tested this and it's working, fine. Or when you want to create a new policy for a particular business case, you want to do it in audit mode, and after 2-3 days, you now roll it out in block mode. Never leave things in audit mode. Always remember to enable an audit, take your information, analyze, and always put it in block mode. Audit mode is not really protecting. Audit mode is only telling you what is happening in your environment. It's only when you put it in block mode that is actually blocking. So never forget that. And this is where you do exclusions. So if you have unique applications that you don't need to scan their specific process, I always say to people, do not just put processes here. Specify path/process. So for instance, if there's an application called Joy.secure, and this application is legit, but we don't want the antivirus to be scanning Joy.exe, because every time we keep scanning it, it's making the system slow. And we're very sure that Joy.exe is a legit application, depending on where the application was installed on the endpoint. Take that part and exclude the part. I always recommend never to just exclude processes, because for instance, SVC host is a process you should never exclude from antivirus, because most backdoors masquerade themselves as SVC host. So you can imagine if you go and exclude an SVC host.exe process, what you have said is even when a malware masquerades itself as that process, irrespective of where it is running from, it will not scan it. But if you say joy.exe is legit, joy.exe will only be installed in one location, right? So if for any reason something is masquerading my process, it will not be running from the exact legitimate application process. That's why I said that in understanding endpoint security, people need to start understanding how systems and processes work. That's how you do full endpoint security. Because when you understand it, you understand why you should set a policy in this way, why you should set a rule in this way, because that's how the malwares, when they attack, how they behave. So for instance, notepad.exe, if I'm sending a backdoor and I'm creating it as a notepad, right? Most times if you want to run a batch executable, it will come like a notepad, right? So legitimately, that Microsoft Word document ran as winword.exe, but embedded in it, right, were other sub-processes. Imagine you have excluded winword.exe. It will not be able to detect the child processes under it, because it is winword that needs to run for that other one to go. And you have said, do not scan this, allow it go. I don't know if it's making sense, guys. Yeah, because I can't see faces. When you're teaching and you can't see faces, it can be a bit confusing. You don't know if your class is still with you, or if you've lost them.
We're
Yes,
still
We're
here.
still with you. We're still here.
Yeah, and because it's also audio, everybody's trying to be quiet. So sometimes you're like, hope nobody has slept on me.
No, it's just something new and interesting. So we're just taking everything in.
Okay, so good to know. So this is how I encourage. So if you're here and you're responsible for endpoint protection or antivirus in your environment, just go back and think on how so when they come, the application guides, database guys come down on you shouting, exclude this, calm down and say, what's the issue? Your antivirus is snowing my system. Fine. What I don't want antivirus on my system. No. Every organization I've worked, they'll tell you, Joy is a terror. You can't justify to me why you don't want antivirus on your system. It will never work where I am. I will show you how I will have antivirus on your system, and you'll be shocked at how I will not be consuming resources, because I will study your application, what your application does, and be able to know how to make the right exclusion, so that the other things that are not responsible for your application, the antivirus solution can ensure that that endpoint is secured. Because when the chips are down, everybody is going to come back to say, oh, your antivirus is not working, your EDR is not working. You're going to be the one getting all the hand because you wanted to exclude everything for everybody and make them happy. Okay, and then you schedule scan time. Always put scan time for servers at midnight, because those are peak period, or at late at night. Those are off peak period. And then you can put scan system. This is it. So allow on access protection, definitely yes. Remediate action for severe threats. We tell you what to do immediately. Should we block? Should we allow? Should we quarantine? Should we clean? So for severe threats, we always recommend, block. So for somebody who asks, where are the rules set? This is where you set the rules for antivirus detection. So it's an EDR detection for antivirus detection. This is where you set the rules. When you did action for moderate, you want to probably say quarantine. And then for low, you then want to say clean and try to recover the file. And then once you're done, you do a next. The same thing, determine where you want to target to. Depending on if you're targeting it to users, you target it to users. If you're targeting it to group, then to devices, you target it to devices. And you can create a device group that is a user and a device group that is so you can create a group that is for users and a group that is for devices. At the same time, you can also exclude people from this policy or exclude devices from this policy. And that's it. You've created the antivirus policy, and that's it. And even from the antivirus dashboard, let's assume the antivirus is detecting a malware, you'll also be able to see it here that the AV is running detections on heavy endpoint active malware. You'll be able to see everything show up here. Okay. Are we good?
Yeah, we are. No questions at this moment.
Okay. All right. And so we move on to for attack surface reduction is a totally different class. Yeah, and then let's look at the firewall too. So I've been in organizations where they say, turn off the firewall, turn off firewall. So the good thing with the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, you can use this to manage your Windows firewall, right? Once a device has been onboarded, you can use this to manage the Windows firewall. Yes, so that's the good thing about another value add that the Defender for Endpoint brings. You can use it to manage the Windows firewall. So when people turn off Windows firewall, and when you're doing investigation on attack, you're finding out, oh, the Windows firewall was turned off. When people say turn off the Windows firewall, I say, what are you trying to communicate? Because ideally, if you're having a legitimate communication on an endpoint, you should have a listening port and a receiving port. And then we understand it. So if it is a server that is listening on XYZ port and is expecting a particular port to communicate to it, you go to the firewall and create. Or if it is a process that you do not want the firewall to prevent, you go and specify that that process should be allowed for either inbound or outbound, so that every other thing is protected. Never be in a hurry to just say disable, allow. Take some time. The beauty about understanding endpoints and endpoint management and endpoint security is when you understand how systems communicate and how applications exchange communication. So every service that is being consumed is listening on a port. Every port is being executed, every service is being executed by a process. So the Windows firewall, all it's doing is preventing processes and port communication. So if somebody is saying this is blocking, what you need to do is understand how that process is operating on that endpoint, and then create an exclusion for that process, not disabling the whole Windows firewall. Does it make sense? Yeah. So that's the same thing you do here for firewall. Same thing, create a firewall rule, and then so you can have a firewall rule, and then you can also have for the firewall. So for the firewall rule, you can say, oh, permit inbound, outbound. And then you add, and so here you either enable your rule, call it whatever you want to call it. Do you want this permission to be allowed when the person is remotely, or when the person is on a wireless network, or when the person, technology is so sweet. Most times, if you are involved in threat investigation, you would see that it is not the solutions that don't work. It is that we as administrators and engineers do not do it right. So it's interesting to come down to understand endpoints so that you can learn how to secure them properly. It's not just even by deploying the solution. If you started this class, you will see that it took us less than 5 minutes to download and onboard, and we have actually deployed. In now making sure that this solution works, you can see how much time we're spending and the analysis. And this is not even a real typical scenario. You need to understand. That's how you ensure endpoint security. You need to understand systems. You need to understand how they talk, how they function. So you have firewall rules that says, do you want, is this application, because this is what will happen when there's a threat vector in your environment and it has done a bit of reconnaissance. For instance, the guys in treasury, if you work in the bank, the guys in treasury always have these custom applications that they use to trade. Those applications have processes. If for any reason somebody has come and done a bit of learning in the environment, ideally, the treasury process should not run when the person is. I'm just saying that if, for instance, you have a policy that says this treasury app can only function in our network, meaning that if somebody is remotely, it should not. When the person is working with a remote IP, the person should not. We would not want anybody to be able to trigger this application when they are remotely, when they are on LAN. Yes. The same thing with wireless. I worked in an organization, and what we did when we enabled wireless, because for instance, I can be in my car and I can discover my organization's wireless and I can work. So what we did was the core banking application was not accessible over wireless. No matter where you are. In fact, we went as far as saying that if you do not use the core banking application, you won't even be able to, if you put the URL of core banking application, not even open on your laptop. You could set those kind of firewall rules. This is now on firewall layer. Just saying that when you do security and do it right, it's very interesting, because that way you have frustrated, even when an attacker comes in, you are putting several things. He needs to go the extra, he needs to spend more time trying to understand the environment. So do not just permit things for permission's sake. You can go very granular to say this application that they're asking for should not even work when they're not in the office, or should not work when they are on VPN, or should not work when they are here. And then you can narrow it down and create this kind of permissions. So here, just select. And then you can say, you can go as granular as the file path, where this firewall permission, where it's going to see that this process exists and you should allow it. The port, edge transversal, this is a new feature Microsoft just, I don't even know what this is. This is interesting. I don't know what edge transversal means. This is new to me. And that's the good thing with using Microsoft Defender, because as they enhance and update, there's no impact on you. Imagine your local antivirus solution or endpoint or EDR. When the vendors release new version, you need to do tests, go to CAB, go to change, request for server, do upgrade, change details, and all of that. Here, Microsoft just released the new features there. When you come, you see it, or when you research and you see it, then you can now begin to apply it to your environment. And test. I'm just saying this for the first time. Local user authorization is you can want to add local users that you have this or not. Network type, should it be on? So if you go to your firewall, you will see that you have domain, private, public. It's asking, is this for the domain, private, or public network type? And then what direction, is it an inbound or outbound request? And then service name, you want to be very granular and put the service name, you want to specify the port, then the action to take, should we allow or block, depending on what you're doing. You can go very granular with this, what type of protocol. So if it sees a traffic coming as UDP instead of TCP for this particular thing, it will block. What Microsoft is just saying that you can now centrally manage your Windows firewall that used to be a pain for people. Administrators would just turn off Windows firewall. You see, the application is not working. When we were troubleshooting, when we turned off Windows firewall, everything went. I used to tell them, perfect. So it means there's Windows firewall. So what do? Can we sit down now? And then we look through the traffic and pick out the permissions and then go to, Defender, create the exclusions and leave Windows firewall turned on and your application will move. But this shows you that you can make those exclusions no matter the application type, while still ensuring that the endpoint is still secured for any other thing that is not that application that needs Windows firewall turned on. Any other question, please?
I think Helen has one. She said firewall is mostly hardware devices. Does this mean that the firewall has to be onboarded first for the endpoint and Microsoft Defender?
Okay, so firewall is not mostly hardware devices. So we have your typical firewall that your network firewall, right? That that is on your network segment. This is your endpoint firewall. So a Windows operating system has Windows firewall. Your endpoints, right, have communication. So in endpoint security, we have what we call intrusion prevention, endpoint firewalls. We want to be able to put endpoint firewalls. So the likes of McAfee, Kaspersky, Sophos will give you firewall agents. McAfee will call it the host intrusion prevention. I can't remember what Kaspersky will call it. And you would have to install them on those devices so that you can prevent bilateral communication. Windows by default gives you Windows firewall. It's on the endpoint. You're not installing it. So the moment you have onboarded this device to the Defender, that sensor for the Windows file, that sensor can push Windows firewall policies. That's what we're saying with this. So that your default Windows firewall. You can see this is Windows firewall. So this is it. So this is it. Windows firewall typically exists on your system. Now I can manage this window. Ideally, what you will hear is turn Windows firewall off and on. So people would come here and turn it off so that they can do, the application can work. Now, once this device is onboarded, you can come here and create firewall policies that can exclude what process they need while still leaving it to run to secure other processes that are not the one that needs exclusion. That makes sense. I can repeat myself if I don't really get hit the point.
Yeah, she says it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So in summary, the hardware firewall we're referring to are network devices. You have network firewalls that probably sit at different segments of the network. That's not what we're referring. We're referring to. Some people will call it software-based firewall because they are sitting on the endpoint and running off the software. Okay, so in summary, we've seen the different policies that can be created using Microsoft Defender for endpoint. We've seen that we can create the firewall rules, we can create the antivirus, we can create the EDR. All of these sensors were created and all of these policies were created and the sensor begins to send these telemetries to the Microsoft Defender for endpoint. And so this device would begin to feed us with this information. I'm looking at that we have just 16 minutes, so I don't want to jump into looking at each of the looking at the incidents. Looking at that in our next class, we'll come and we'll take each incident and we will look at how each of these incidents, the impact. We'll first of all look at the role-based access control. We'll look at tagging, and then if next class is the right time, we'll look at the incidents. But in our next class, I'm looking at that, we'll look at role-based access control. We'll look at tagging, how you tag devices, role-based access control. One other thing that's important. When you're setting up your Defender for Endpoint and you come to settings, it's very important that there are certain features that you turn on here. Okay. Yes. So you come to the advanced features. So remember, I talked about the data storage. Come to advanced features, yes, and make sure some of these things are not turned on by default. Yeah, so for instance, your device discovery will not be turned on, so you have to turn it on. The device discovery is what allows you to discover devices. This is what connects you to the Tune device management. This is what gives you web content filtering, where you can block access to certain websites. Okay, this is what shows user display. So please come to the advanced features and enable some of this. And do not turn on live response and unsigned script execution. This is only used in troubleshooting, because the moment you turn this off, it allows somebody to have elevated privilege to run unsigned scripts on the endpoint. This is only turned during an investigation, and most times after the device has been isolated, then we use this to do an investigation. So this should be off, okay? And then you turn off all the automated investigation, and then when you are done putting your EDR in audit mode, and you're done, you come and enable your EDR in block mode here, okay? You turn this on to block or allow files. You turn this on for custom network indicators we'll be looking at. Tamper protection, this is how you prevent people from disabling the antivirus. I used to have, in the early days of my career, fight with lots of administrators who would just go and turn off the antivirus because they thought it was disturbing them or blocking the application. And then lo and behold, in the night, there will be an attack or there will be an incident. And because the antivirus is not turned on, the MCAT script will be able to run easily, and the antivirus would not be able to prevent it. Okay, so it's very important you come to advanced features and turn these functionalities on. Okay. So in our next class, we'll be looking at some of these functionality. We'll look at device, we'll look at tagging, we'll look at role-based, how you segment roles, who's to do what. We'll look at the indicators, and then we'll take a case study and show you how you utilize your file hashes, your IP address, your URLs and domain on the indicators. Yes, we'll be looking at those in the next class and how all of this play into securing the endpoint. So you all agree with me on this note that Microsoft Defender is not just an antivirus, it's a full-blown enterprise threat protection security suite. And it's a huge one, it's a new one that has come. It's been here for a while, but it's something that I encourage everybody, to, it broadens you, exposes you to more and more around the endpoint, and looking forward to early adopters. Thank you very much.